Behind the mask of pride and control, there is often a deep emptiness they are always trying to escape. They want to control more than a room or a moment. They want to control people, especially the ones who care the most. That is the part many people miss. Their sense of worth does not come from peace inside. It comes from outside reactions. They need praise. They need attention. They need arguments. They even need your pain if it keeps your focus on them. That steady stream keeps their false image alive. And when that stream slows down, the mask starts to crack. This is why pulling back affects them so much. Not because you screamed, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped feeding the game. You took your energy back. You stopped offering your heart as proof that they still mattered. And that is something they do not know how to handle. A person like this can deal with anger. They can work with tears. They can even twist hatred into something useful, because it still means they live in your mind. But real distance is different. Real calm is different. Real silence shakes them. When their words stop landing, when their actions stop changing your mood, when their presence no longer pulls emotion out of you, they begin to face the thing they fear most: irrelevance. If you stay with me to the end, you will see why this changes everything. Because the deepest wound for someone obsessed with control is not being attacked. It is being seen as powerless to affect you at all. Think about the way they move through relationships. It is rarely about true connection. It is about exchange. They do not look at you and see a full human being with your own private world, your own needs, and your own value. Too often, they see usefulness. If you praise them, they feel lifted. If you argue with them, they feel strong. If you cry over them, they feel important. Even if you are angry, they still win something because your emotions are still circling around them. That is why indifference hits so hard. It tells them they no longer shape your inner world. For a person who depends on controlling the emotional weather around them, that feels like a crushing loss. And here is where it gets even more powerful. By stepping back, you reveal a truth they cannot comfortably accept. You are separate from them. You have a life outside their reach. You can think for yourself. You can feel without asking permission. You can leave the story where they cast themselves as the center of everything. That is terrifying to them because it breaks the fantasy they depend on. If you can walk away and slowly regain peace, then maybe they were never as big, strong, or special as they claimed. And once that idea enters the room, even quietly, it starts to tear down the entire structure. So, if you have ever felt guilty for becoming distant, hear this clearly. Sometimes distance is not cold. Sometimes it is clarity. Sometimes it is the first honest step back into your own life, and that is where the power begins. There is also something deeper happening when you stop reacting. You are not only changing the relationship, you are changing what you believe about yourself. As long as you stay trapped in their cycle, every insult, every mixed signal, every dramatic scene keeps pulling your value into their hands. You start measuring yourself by their approval, their mood, their silence, or their sudden affection. That is how the trap works. Slowly, quietly, one moment at a time. But the second you refuse to keep playing, you make a strong statement without saying much at all. You tell yourself that your worth is not decided by their opinion. You tell your nervous system that it no longer has to stand at attention every time they shift. You stop living like a puppet waiting for the next pull of the string. And let's be honest, that is not easy. It sounds simple from the outside, but it takes real strength because part of you still wants to be understood. Part of you still wants them to finally see the damage they caused and say the words you deserved to hear. I was wrong. I hurt you. I see what I did. But that moment may never come. And this is the hard truth most people spend too long resisting. Your healing cannot be built on a confession from someone who survives by avoiding truth. That is why walking away matters so much. It is not passive. It is not weakness. It is a decision to stop waiting for rescue from the person who helped create the pain. And if this is hitting home, keep listening because the next part explains why trying harder usually gives them more control, not less. The more you try to make them understand your pain, the more power you often hand back to them. That is the twist that hurts to accept. You explain yourself again. You defend your heart again. You hope this time they will hear it, feel it, and change. But many times your effort simply becomes more fuel. Your long messages, your tears, your need for closure, your wish to be seen fairly. All of it keeps the bond alive in the very way that serves them best. They stay important because they still control your emotional movement. But something changes the moment you stop pushing for understanding. The moment you stop trying to force insight into someone who keeps choosing distortion, the balance begins to shift, quietly but completely. You stop asking them to give you what they were never ready to give. You stop standing at a locked door, hoping it will suddenly open. And that is when the real reversal happens. You are no longer chasing approval. You are no longer begging for honesty. You are no longer trying to prove your pain deserves recognition. You simply move. You rebuild. You turn your face toward your own life. And for someone who feeds on influence, that is devastating because their biggest fear is not being hated. Hate still ties you to them. Their biggest fear is becoming emotionally invisible. When you truly reach the point where their words no longer shake you and their actions no longer define your day, they are left with nothing to feed on. No drama, no worship, no emotional storm, just absence, just stillness, just the unbearable fact that you are no longer theirs to disturb, and that silence can say more than any final speech ever could. What makes this hit so deeply is that their whole identity often depends on outside supply. Attention is not just pleasant to them, it can feel necessary. Praise, admiration, conflict, control, emotional reactions, all of it helps hold up the image they have built. Without that stream, shame starts creeping in. Emptiness starts speaking, doubt gets louder. That false sense of greatness begins to wobble. This is why your withdrawal feels like more than a breakup or a disagreement. To them, it can feel like an attack on the system that keeps them emotionally upright. And here's the chilling part. Love, fights, and tears can all function the same way if they keep your energy aimed at them. That is why chaos often follows when you begin to pull away. Suddenly, the charm returns. Or the guilt trip starts, or the anger rises, or they act wounded in ways that make you question your choice. But do not confuse desperation with love. Do not confuse panic with self-awareness. Very often, they are not grieving the loss of you as a real person. They are reacting to the loss of access, the loss of influence, the loss of supply. That is why the response can look so intense. You are not just leaving a role in their life. You are closing off something they relied on. And if you go back every time they panic, you teach them that fear can still bring you running. But if you remain steady, something else happens. They are forced to meet a version of reality where your mind is no longer available for occupation. That is not cruelty, that is consequence. And yes, it stings them, not because you destroyed them, but because you stopped helping them avoid themselves. There is another truth that is hard to swallow, but deeply freeing once you see it. They often needed you more than you needed them, even if they acted untouchable. They may have looked powerful. They may have seemed above it all. They may have carried themselves like you were lucky just to be chosen. But beneath that performance, they often relied on your attention far more than they would ever admit. Your reactions gave them shape. Your care gave them a mirror. Your pain gave them proof that they mattered. Meanwhile, even though you were hurt, you still had something they could not build for themselves, an inner life. You had the ability to feel deeply, to reflect, to bond, to grow, to rebuild meaning from inside. That matters more than you think. Because when the relationship ends, you may feel shattered for a time, but you are not empty. You can grieve and still remain real. You can hurt and still remain whole at the core. They often cannot tolerate that kind of inner silence. Being ignored to them is not a small bruise. It can feel like a collapse. Without outside reflection, they are left alone with the fear that there may be nothing solid under the image. And that is why your calm can wound them more than harsh words ever could. Harsh words still keep the bond active. Calm breaks it. Distance breaks it. Moving on breaks it. So if you are waiting for the perfect comeback, maybe this is the line you need instead. Your peace is the comeback. Your stability is the answer. Your refusal to keep bleeding for their lesson is the moment the whole game starts to end. When they feel you slipping out of reach, they often do not let go quietly. This is the stage that confuses many people. Suddenly they may become softer, kinder, more emotional, more generous, or the opposite happens. They become colder, sharper, more punishing, more dramatic. Either way, the goal is often the same: pull you back into reaction, regain access, reopen the channel. They may use guilt. They may rewrite history. They may act like the victim. They may hint that no one will love you the way they did. They may even offer a version of change that sounds just believable enough to stir hope again. Watch this part carefully. It is where many people almost win their freedom, then hand it back because the performance feels convincing in the moment. But real change is not panic behavior. Real change is steady, humble, long-term work. And that is not something you can force from the outside. So when they become frantic, understand what you are really seeing. You are witnessing the loss of control, not necessarily the birth of truth. And this is where your power becomes visible. Not in a loud scene, not in a speech, but in your ability to stay grounded while they search for the old buttons that used to work. Every time you refuse the bait, you weaken the pattern. Every time you do not return to defend yourself, explain yourself, or chase fairness, you step farther out of their reach. This is why silence can feel so strong. It is not empty. It is full of decision. It is full of self-respect. And if you have ever wondered what real strength looks like after emotional chaos, this is it. A steady nervous system, a closed door, a life that no longer opens just because they knock. But the real reason leaving matters is not what it does to them. It is what it starts doing to you. For so long, your emotional world may have been arranged around their moods, their approval, their anger, their silence, and their constant shifts. You may have doubted your memory, doubted your worth, doubted your instincts. You may have become so focused on managing them that you forgot what it felt like to simply be yourself without pressure in the room. That is the damage many people do not notice until later. Not just the fights, not just the lies, but the slow shrinking of your own center. Walking away begins the return. At first, it can feel strange, too quiet, too open, even lonely. There may be moments when you miss the intensity and mistake that for love. There may be nights when you wonder if you gave up too soon. That is normal. Healing rarely feels dramatic in a beautiful way at the start. It often feels plain, silent, unfamiliar. But that quiet is not emptiness. It is space. It is your mind no longer bracing for impact. It is your body learning that peace does not need to be earned by pleasing someone impossible. And over time, something amazing begins to happen. You start hearing your own thoughts again, your own likes, your own no, your own yes, your own standards. The person you thought was lost was never gone. Buried, maybe. Exhausted, yes, but not gone. So if this season feels still, do not fear it. Stay with it. Because this may be the first honest calm you have felt in a very long time. As you keep choosing distance, you begin to see the truth more clearly. Their emptiness was never your job to fix. Their chaos was never a mirror of your value. Their manipulation was not proof that you were weak. It was proof that they were willing to use confusion to stay in control. Once that becomes clear, your energy starts shifting in a powerful way. Instead of spending your days trying to decode them, you begin investing in yourself. Your sleep matters again, your friendships matter again, your hobbies return, food tastes different, music hits differently, small quiet things start feeling alive again. That is not random. That is what happens when your mind is no longer held hostage by someone else's storms. And yes, there will still be moments of pull, a memory, a message, a familiar kind of loneliness that tricks you into romanticizing the pain. When that happens, pause, breathe. Remember what the cycle cost you. Remember how often you had to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. Remember how tired you were, because the goal was never to change them into someone safe. The goal is to change your relationship with yourself. That is where freedom lives. Every time you choose not to re-enter the chaos, you strengthen your own foundation. Every time you refuse to explain your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it, you reclaim another piece of your life. And slowly, without needing a grand announcement, they begin to fade. Not because what happened was small, but because your future is finally becoming bigger than the wound. And that shift, though quiet, is where your true power starts becoming permanent. One of the most beautiful parts of this process is realizing you do not have to carry roles that never belong to you. You are not their healer. You are not their emotional parent. You are not a machine built to produce comfort, praise, and endless understanding on demand. You are a human being with a life of your own, a path of your own, a mind that deserves rest. And when that truth lands fully, a huge weight begins to fall away. You no longer feel responsible for managing their ego, predicting their moods, softening every hard truth, or fixing every crisis they create. You let the burden go back where it belongs. With them, that release can feel almost unreal at first. So much of your energy may have been tied up in survival that freedom feels unfamiliar, but stay there. Let it be unfamiliar. Let it teach you something new. This is what self-respect can sound like when it is no longer begging to be chosen. This is what self-love can look like when it stops performing and starts protecting. And here is a line worth holding on to. Peace is not boring when you have lived inside emotional warfare. Peace is medicine. Peace is your life returning. The silence after chaos may feel loud at first, but listen closely. It is your own voice coming back. It is your own soul becoming audible again after too much noise. So fill that silence with what is real. Friends who care, work that matters, small rituals, slow mornings, honest laughter, things that do not demand you bleed just to belong. Because while they may continue chasing new sources of attention, you have the rare chance to break the cycle entirely and build something real in its place. The deeper you move into your own life, the more you understand something that once felt impossible. Their panic was never proof of deep love. It was proof of lost access. That may sound harsh, but it can save you years of confusion. Someone can fight hard to keep you and still not know how to love you well. Someone can become emotional when you leave and still be grieving control more than connection. That is why your boundaries matter so much. Not as punishment, not as revenge, but as protection for the person you are becoming. And once you see that clearly, you stop taking every reaction as a sign that you should return. You stop reading every last-minute apology as destiny. You stop confusing intensity with sincerity. This is the moment where a lot of people finally exhale, because they no longer need to decode every move. The whole picture becomes simple. If contact costs your peace, the answer is distance. If engagement reopens the wound, the answer is space. If their version of love keeps requiring your self-erasure, the answer is no. Clean, quiet, final if needed. And no, that does not make you cruel. It makes you awake. It means you are no longer offering your mind as a place for someone else's disorder to live rent-free. You are becoming selective with your energy, protective of your future, loyal to your own healing. And if you are still here, this is the part to remember. Choosing yourself after chaos is not selfish. It is sacred. It is how your life begins to belong to you again in a way no one can easily take. There is a special kind of relief that comes when you accept you cannot fix someone who does not want truth more than performance. That acceptance is not defeat. It is wisdom. It ends the exhausting habit of trying one more time, explaining one more way, sacrificing one more piece of yourself for a breakthrough that never lasts. The moment you stop taking responsibility for their inner emptiness, you free up enormous space inside your own life. Space to dream again, space to rest, space to become. And that is why walking away is not just an ending, it is a beginning with teeth. It is a declaration that your life will no longer revolve around someone else's hunger for power. This strange quiet after separation can feel unfamiliar if you were used to constant tension, but over time it becomes beautiful. You begin to enjoy your own company. You begin to trust your own judgment. You begin to notice how much easier it is to breathe when you're not always waiting for the next emotional storm. That matters more than people realize. Because in that calm, your identity starts rebuilding itself on solid ground. Not on fear, not on approval, not on survival mode, on truth, on values, on choice. You stop living in reaction and start living on purpose. And the more purpose enters your days, the less power the old dynamic has over your mind. They become what they always should have been: a chapter, not the author, a lesson, not your future, a noise you no longer tune into. And once you taste that level of emotional independence, it becomes very hard to trade it back for chaos, no matter how familiar the chaos once felt. By this point, the biggest shift is no longer about what they feel. It is about what you now know. You know your worth does not shrink because someone failed to honor it. You know silence can protect more than arguments ever could. You know your peace has value. You know walking away with dignity says more than revenge ever will. And this is where the script of your life changes. Their old story said your value depended on their opinion, their attention, their choice to include or reject you. But by leaving, you break that story completely. You prove that your identity is not something they get to hand out or take back. You confirm through action that you exist fully outside their view. That kind of freedom is almost unbearable for a controlling person to witness because it exposes the truth. They were never the source of your worth. They were only a loud voice standing in front of it. Once you move past them, that truth becomes visible again, clear, bright, steady. And here is the part many people secretly find most satisfying. After all the effort they put into shaping your reality, they still lose the one thing they wanted most: your inner submission, your dependence, your belief that they define you. When you move on with your self-respect intact, you become proof that their power was never absolute. And for someone built on the illusion of control, that is a painful thing to face. Not because you attacked them, but because you lived. Fully, freely, without asking for permission. And sometimes that is the strongest answer you could ever give. In the end, the most powerful act is not revenge. It is not a dramatic final speech. It is not making them hurt in the exact way they hurt you. It is something quieter and stronger. It is taking your identity back without apology. It is refusing to keep proving your pain to someone committed to denying it. It is choosing a future defined by peace instead of power struggles. When you do that, you are not just leaving a harmful dynamic. You are coming home to yourself, and that changes everything. Because once they lose the ability to control how you see yourself, the deepest part of their hold is gone. What remains is just noise, memory, and the fading shadow of something that no longer owns space in your mind. Yes, they may continue performing for the world. Yes, they may search for new attention. Yes, they may never admit what your silence meant. But deep down, the message lands. They lost access to your emotional world. They lost the mirror they once used. They lost the role of being central in your life, and you gained something far greater. You gained your own mind back, your own dignity, your own direction. So keep walking, keep choosing calm over chaos, truth over confusion, and self-respect over old hunger. Healing may not move in a straight line, but it moves day by day, choice by choice. And every time you choose yourself, you make the old control weaker. This is your life now, your voice, your pace, your light. Let that be the ending they never expected and the beginning you always deserved.